gracias. Lo primero, por supuesto, transmitir nuestro agradecimiento a los organizadores del evento, a la Fiscalía General de la República, por permitirnos formar parte de este intercambio y por permitirnos presentarles a ustedes en este auditorio, en el cual considero que me encuentro un poco como que fuera de...
I like a fish out of the water because it's quite more likely that those in the room are on the other side of the court, where I usually am. This presentation on the crime of embezzlement, which is the object of my study, we don't think this will be biased assessment or promoting impunity or to become more benevolent in terms of tackling embezzlement as a type of corruption and of economic crimes. We join other colleagues in the criteria previously expressed, but with my presentation, I only wish to present some technicalities that will contribute to serve better justice and to do things as appropriate as possible without criteria that can lead to misuse of the types of crimes and the type of sanctions or punishments that should be applied to these types of crimes. I apologize if I speak fastly, but I hope I am clear on my assessment so you can understand of all the parties in a trial is to serve better justice. And this, at the speed the speaker is speaking, it is impossible to interpret.
El delito de malversación en nuestro derecho penal es una de esas figuras que requiere una revisión si nos atenemos a los postulados doctrinales que hoy se enarbolan. La malversación destaca como uno de los típicos delitos de corrupción, que por obvias y bien justificadas razones de política criminal le corresponden sanciones severas desde la propia conformación de sus marcos penales. Aquí hago un primer apartado.
Never the timely implementation of that principle that allows to give a non-criminal treatment to those crimes that can be solved administratively. And perhaps they are worthy of a different sanction in order to effectively tackle economic crimes and those that affect the economic performance of the state. When referring to this, because this would lead us to material responsibility or the limit of value, this also conveys our concern on our need to rethink and revisit the criteria of Instruction 165 of the Supreme People's Court in order to tone it down to the current circumstances of our economy. In general terms, a definition of embezzlement shall include an active subject with the quality of being a public official. The official should be in charge of worth, money, assets, as part of their performance of their office, that they get them or give them a use that is inappropriate. Heritage and subject embezzlement must be performed by public officials as part of their job. Get those assets and get them outside, and that is different from people who have private assets and by a standard are understood as public. For example, legal deposits or embargoes. Different behaviors by embezzlers is the one that is included in our code. and that should be analyzed in this presentation is the subtraction or stealing of financial and material resources for inappropriate use, embezzlement by use, and in Article 25, abuse of their exercise or performance of their duty, like the inability or failure to safeguard the assets under their care of a public official. All those behaviors are internationally considered embezzlement. Not only the one that is included in our code. The introduction of embezzlement in one or other category depends on the goods that have been misused or misappropriated. Those are emphasized on the individual and others on the protection of the public heritage. I think that if there is a theory or an eclectic position, the dual nature of embezzlement or plural condition of embezzlement should be taken into consideration. We have the duties and the commitment of the official with the government and also with the people, because they damage the interest of the state. This type of crime is classified as inappropriate behavior. If they don't meet a given quality, then they should respond as a criminal offense. We also have the relationship between the active subjects, so that it is indispensable that those who commit the crime are public officials. Those who hold a leadership post has more assets entrusted, and therefore the assets they protect are under a greater risk. The prevailing doctrine states that it is not only to be interpreted, but assessed whether the official actually holds that position. The officials don't depend on their title, and the definitions by public administration and the jurisprudence of each country has included different requirements to consider an individual a public official that serves as a public or civil servant, and that they have powers over an asset or the link between the object and the subject. Title and active participation would be the two elements that make the concept or make up the concept of public official. These then take into account the position, the activities, and the specific skills or competences of the individual. Whether we go for one action or another, we expand or limit the concept of embezzlement. On the other hand, when we demand a specific competence, you reduce the standards in order to determine whether the subject had specific powers, and thus double-check the functional link. Individuals who take assets from state-owned companies are simply stealing or robbing and not necessarily embezzling, but public officials are supposed to safeguard those assets. So the crime of embezzlement is usually and necessarily inside organized institutions that have a certain hierarchy and involve individuals on different levels of that hierarchy, and they must follow certain behaviors. They have a special duty but different level of power or authority. Decision makers are different from those who administer and from those who undertake actions. Therefore, they will face different levels of responsibility and sanctions. We also have non-qualified participants where that don't have a special duty but do contribute to the commission of the crime. There is a discussion whether these individuals should also respond, but how? Some say that the extraneous should respond for a common crime, and others claim that they should be considered as accessories to the crime. Others defend that if they're involved, they should get a lower or smaller sanction, not because of their role, but because they don't have the role to safeguard those assets. But this could be done under adjustment standards of the sanctions. So as we understand it, for the purposes of my presentation, is stealing or subtraction or misuse of assets. Concerning the object, there is a consensus on the public nature of the heritage that is to be safeguarded, understanding that public character as a standard. And here we wanted to call your attention on what is the scope of the public to commit economic crimes like embezzlement in the area of public or state-owned companies that under a regime of private law should not lead to the lack of protection of state activities. The entity undertakes private activities but have a public purpose.
Intentaré brevemente ver cuál ha sido el devenir histórico de esta figura en nuestras legislaciones. Como refería quien me antecedía, en Cuba regió el Código Español hasta el Código de Defensa Social de 1934, que en su artículo 420 recogía el delito de malversación, haciendo expresa referencia al término funcionario público y disponiendo un marco amplísimo para la imposición de las penas. Mediante Instrucción 55 de 1975, el máximo órgano juzgador dispuso una pauta interpretativa que devino casi literalmente la fórmula normativa que se estableció en el nuevo Código de 1979 y que perdura hasta nuestros días. Es preciso señalar además que este Código de Defensa Social sufrió variaciones después de 1959 con el fin de adecuarlo a las nuevas circunstancias.
The code underwent changes after 1959. We created the Office for the Recovery of Embezzled Assets, and embezzlement was characterized as a counter-revolutionary crime of a special nature, imposing very severe sanctions. With the 1979 code, several significant changes were identified. The term public official was changed by those who have to safeguard assets under their possession, which enlarged the group of people who could commit this type of crime. So this is no longer a matter of evidence to know whether the official is a public official or not, but if the agent had under its keeping assets that belong to the socialist revolution. These wanted to give more importance to the object than to the subject. Other changes were made in terms of the entities, institutions, which of course responds to the legal changes after the 1976 Constitution.
La forma de
the way of This includes punishment in accordance with the value of the goods confiscated. Another important change was the location of this crime. Generally, they identify or they have an impact on private patrimonies. These were meant for cooperatives, mass organizations, etc. This broke with the systematicity, and we have to take into consideration the other crimes always had or were used when this happened in non-state environments. This may have changed a little bit. Embezzlement. In 1987, we had other modifications. We reduced regulatory sanction or the sanction frameworks, and we modified the confiscation of goods. Later on, the article was modified and sanctions were increased. There was a Fifth Amendment or paragraph modified the concept of embezzlement. This unified two crimes or embezzlements for public institutions and embezzlement for non-state institutions. Let us now analyze the current situation on this crime, emphasizing juridical concepts and the theory of participation and
En la tutela del patrimonio estatal de las empresas mixtas, sociedades de capital totalmente cubano y empresas extranjeras de capital totalmente foráneo.
It is important to have a regulatory framework so that persons linked to these types of association, be them nationals or foreigners, should comply with the regulations. However, with new economic actors, we have to revise this and the sanctions, since embezzlements both in public entities and private entities have the same regulatory framework. So we can wonder if it is the same to have a person in a private entity doing embezzlement and a person in a state entity. In the first case, there is a private interest, while in the second, this has an impact in the correct functioning of public administration. This also undermines the credibility of the public servant. It is important to consider both figures according to the type of property so as to give autonomy to public embezzlement in accordance with the interests they protect. Another article attempts against those crimes against the public heritage and private interests. This is not a technicality, nor to have a code similar to other codes. It is an interpretation by the court to give the necessary importance or validity to the crime in question and the goods that are protected. We would have to see how this is implemented. Personally, I make no proposals, though in the provincial court in Havana, there is a special court for embezzlement. And I think future modification should be done on these lines. Another element we have to define is the author of the crime. This has caused different types of sentences. And sometimes we have sanctioned or qualified as embezzlement relations where there is no formal links between the person who commits the embezzlement crime and the goods she had to protect. Thus, we find different types of persons who only provide service but do not have the responsibility of protecting the goods. This modifies the circle of authors of crime. So, we have to go to administrative actions or measures. It cannot be so ambiguous that any person can become an author of a crime. We have to make a difference between the administrative function that any person may have because she has access to the goods than the person who is in charge or responsible for their administration or management. This should be the line. It should be a guarantee of imposing the proper sentences. If there is a person who is guilty of embezzlement, must answer accordingly. When none of the subjects have this quality, the imputation should be on a common crime. There have been no theoretical solid arguments on these issues. It has been the case of persons that can be doing public functions. They have embezzled goods and they are sanctioned as such when actually they were not responsible for these goods. To determine the degree of punishment must take into consideration all these facts. Our criminal code only includes modification of sanctions for the author of the crime and not for accomplices. We can individualize the participation of each subject. This observation is aimed at using the categories and concepts adequately so that illegal behaviors or actions be sanctioned. To conclude, when faced with the task of reforming our code, we must include the concept of embezzlement under another chapter, and we must foresee the degree of guilt of the individuals involved, so that not everybody is sanctioned for committing embezzlement. Any other person involved that did not have the responsibility of protecting the goods cannot be considered the author or of that crime. We would have to analyze why in Chapter 5 we have included overprotection of the private economic action. Questions like this could motivate the debate on embezzlement in our daily lives, the same way we discuss other important aspects. Thank you. We thank the speaker.
Y tratando de cumplir con el programa previsto, le damos las palabras.